Hi, and welcome to our channel and this video. Let's get right into it. So, as the thumbnail shows here, I want to introduce you to a few things. But first, I want to define the problems to solve, the solutions, and then a demo of this whole thing. So, let's explain a little bit more about this thumbnail through those slides. So, let's talk about the problems. Well, ChatGPT does have API rate limits. So think about a make.com no code situation. You have a scenario. Sometimes, if you're going through a lot of executions, you can exceed these rate limits. API high cost. Well, the more you do, the more it can cost at their current rates. It is true that API costs over time is getting lower, but I still want to show you how you can save more. Increase error rates. Yes, there are a higher number of request increases, could be a likelihood of errors. Storage and retrieval. Storing and retrieving results, especially when you have maybe 10,000 things that you need to update, it can be a problem. Complex scenarios. The more complex a scenario gets with lots of modules, and modules can become overwhelming. So let's see how we solve those. So the solutions. Well, there's an OpenAI Batch Processing solution. So by using that, you can reduce these limits by grouping these requests into one batch. So let's say you wanted to do 10,000 rows of inputs from a spreadsheet that is fed into the ChatGPT. Well, normally that's done one at a time. Well, now we could take, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, put them to one batch and let it process. By doing so, it also helps out with cost. In fact, OpenAI says you can save 50% when you choose batch processing. And I'm going to go the extra step to show you how you can actually save up to 98%, 98.5% actually. And when you talk about 98.5%, I mean, that's almost free. So it can also centralize error handling, which helps. And then when it's time to receive the batch of the answers from ChatGPT through their OpenAI batch processing, it's time to update, let's say, the same Google Sheet that had the input. Well, if you're talking hundreds, thousands, maybe 10,000 rows, it can, one at a time takes a while. But I'll show you a way of leveraging another thing called Sheets API Batch Update. So just like OpenAI has batch processing, so does Sheets. And so, in other words, instead of watching 10,000 rows slowly update, it'll be boom, one shot. Then regarding the complex scenarios, I'm going to take you through the example of it could take, I believe I have in my demo, 18 modules. I'm going to take this opportunity to show you how to use just one module by using something known as low code. And if you stay to the end of this video, I'm going to share with you the make.com blueprint, the sample Google Sheet and the demo, and the low code being used. Well, if this interests you, and I hope it does because I've worked on this for a while, well then let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're going to get started by looking at a sample spreadsheet. So again, the goal here is to say, okay, for this sample spreadsheet, these are going to be inputs to feed into ChatGPT, and I want the results to go here. So in this use case, we want to take this topic, ask ChatGPT to create SEO keywords, 5 of them, and we're going to have a status process. So we're going to say, okay, I want to get a keyword. Once it comes back and puts in data here, it will also change your status to, hey, it's done, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now, I also want to demonstrate the speed of writing things back instead of one at a time, but instantly. Now, when we use ChatGPT's batch processing, it's asynchronously done, so we have to keep track of the row numbers because it won't return back the order that we gave it. So no worries, if we give the row numbers, it knows where to put it when we apply the Google Sheets API, that batch update thing I was talking about. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that by going down to about 50 or so. So I guess 50 would be 51. right about here, right? Yep. So not counting the header, that'll be 50. So let's skip here to demonstrate. This is shaded blue because it's referring to make.com and a lot of its topics. So let's go ahead and change that to keyword. Let's go down about 50 of these. So I guess that would take us to 152. Let's check. 151, I think. Let's do that. I don't want to go too fast. I know with YouTube you can rewind and so forth. Okay, that's 50. All right, so now let's go over to make.com. So here I have some examples. Let's start off with this as a commentary thing. So typically, if you're going to do this without batching things, you would have data coming from your Google spreadsheet if you're using Sheets, and you want to search for certain criteria. And then once you get that, you want to invoke ChatGPT for each one of those, one by one, one by one, one by one. Then you want to update that to the Google spreadsheet. So that means it will read the status column, keyword yes or no. If it is, process this one, and so forth. Skips over here because it doesn't match and so forth. Okay. So that's what we typically see. Let's go back to our scenario list. Now, when we use the batch processing, this is where it gets a little chaotic. And to be honest, it's probably more complex than what I'm showing here. So I think it's worth describing to you the complexity where I'm going to replace this complexity with just this, only this. So I hope this interests you because I spent a lot of time on this. So let's go back to long form. And here I want to use this as a visual to explain what ChatGPT batch processing requires to make it happen. So let's zoom in here. So here we want to, again, go to the spreadsheet, get all the keywords or the status of get keywords, then take those, bundle them into like a JSON format, but then we want to convert that into one text file because the OpenAI batch processing requires it to be one file in a certain format, which is known as JSON-L. Then we want to store that into a Google Drive file. And then we need to send the file that we created through all this process to the OpenAI servers. That file has to exist there in the exact format that they want. And then I thought it'd be wise, since there's this back and forth where we need to monitor this, right? So here I'm creating a new sheet tab. So if I go back to the spreadsheet, it's going to create a new sheet tab, well, actually in between these, and it'll be like a monitor type of sheet. And then I'll add a header row here, and the row behind that or underneath that, row 2, will actually show you the statuses as it goes. Now, once the OpenAI servers has the file, it also needs a batch referring to that file. So when we send the AI or the file to the OpenAI, it sends us back a response that includes their file ID. So it needs that as we create the batch. I'm going to demonstrate this also by looking at some ChatGPT stuff that shows you their portal. Okay, next, we want to update after each of the batches, the progress, timestamps, things like that. And this is where the complexity is probably worse than this. Probably should have a router here. But what we want to accomplish is, since it says up to 24 hours to process, I've seen it within a minute. So I thought, okay, let's design this where it waits 5 minutes, checks the status, calls the OpenAI service. Is it completed? If not, then wait 30 minutes. Is it completed? If not, wait every hour. up to 24 hours. Then when it is completed, we want to go ahead and get the output that it created. So remember, in this example, we're sending 100 requests. So we expect 100 back. So we have to get that file back from them. And we're going to store that into a Google Drive. Then we want to read that file that we just saved, aggregate through that a little bit. And then we want to go back to the spreadsheet and update this column with 5 keywords. And then we want to update that monitor row to bring it to conclusion. So, as I said, it's probably more than this. So now let's go back to the scenario where I'm claiming all that can be replaced with this. So if I open this up, it's going to call a low-code tool to resolve complexity. So when it resolves a complexity, it needs to make a request, and this is where it goes. The back-end load code being used in this case is Google Apps Script. That's free. There's no cost with that. So no worries on cost. By the way, if you haven't figured out this theme indirectly, I'm being very conscious, right? Airtable's nice. And I will demonstrate things as we grow out this channel with Airtable. But it can come at a cost. Google Sheets, no cost. So I'm just saying. So in this case, we give it a URL, post, body type's raw, it's going to be JSON. And here's where we're going to say, okay, hey, I need the spreadsheet ID of the spreadsheet I was just looking at. What is the sheet name that has data in it? In this case, it's called sheet 1. You want me to check the status for a certain value keyword. So I need to know the name of that column and the matching that I need to look for. And okay, where's the input column? In this case, the first column was article topic. So that's going to be fed to the OpenAI servers. And then when it's all done, it's like, okay, where do I update this? Well, it's going to be the column called SEO calendar ideas, which was what column B. And then it's like, okay, do you also want me to update that status column? It's like, yeah, well, what's the name of that column? Or excuse me, what is the value? It's keyword done. And that's it. So those, I don't know how many elements I was showing in the first scenario, quite a bit. This is it. This is it, right? So I will run this in a moment to go through some things, but I'm going to pause the video and prepare what it looks like the OpenAI system. Okay, so I'm back. So let's go over this one more time, URL, and this is what's being sent. Let's hop on over to batches. So if you log into platform openai.com, assuming you have an account, if not, create one, you can go to the dashboards here and you see batches. So these are some of the previous batches I used. I just wanted to show you some of these did not take long. This is before we run. So for example, here took 45 seconds. Oops. And I think the last test I ran before this live demo, 16 minutes. So not too bad. So we're going to hop back and forth to that as well. Now, as far as the low code, this is the program that includes, let's see, let me do some quick hacking here. This is a bonus tip here. Yes. Boom, boom. I want to create some more real estate here. Click that, click this, delete, get some real estate. Okay. All right, so this is the Google Apps Script Editor. It's a standalone script in this case. So here I brought over some pricing information. This is from the OpenAI API pricing. And so the cost savings I wanted to talk about next, with the current model, is $5 per 1 million input tokens. However, it's $15 for each time per million per output. Now, when you divide it by a million, it does get small. However, this one is still not matured or ready to be part of the latest. But if you do select it now, you say 50% here, and I believe this is like 33%. Now, if you notice here, we have a batch API. And so it does mention up here, you say 50% or somewhere. And so, yes, up here, 50%. And that's what we're going to use. So if we use ChatGPT 4, you get this. So let's go back to the program where I kind of laid out a table here. See if I can zoom in here. It doesn't work. All right, so here we have from that source, if we're not batching the GPT 4.0 model, as I said, $5 for input, and for output, it's $15. So we're going to use that as the base for our savings to the claim I was making. Now, if you use the latest model that is available, you save 50% here, you save 33% here. Now, if we start using batch and it says 50% discount, which is this, so now we're at 50% savings just because we're using batch. However, if we use this model here, we're going to save 75% for the input of tokens, and what we get back, nearly 67% savings. And this is the holy cow moment. The use case we're doing with getting 5 keywords, I don't think you need the best. This mini version, as of this date, is only 0.075, which is 98.5% savings, almost free. The output is 30 cents, which is 98%. If you use the exact same number of tokens on the input and same, with the output, you can get an average of 98.25% savings, but it usually doesn't happen that way. Sometimes you have more output, sometimes more input. So that's the checkoff box of discussing of how you get the savings, where I compare this without batching and using this model with batching, you get up to 98%. However, if you don't want to use the 4 Omni Mini version, you can still use this version to get you 50% here. And if you then convert that to a batch, from here to here is 50%, sorry, and so forth. All right, so when we run this, it sends it to this URL. That URL is this low code here. So we have some global variables. I don't want to get into too much detail. In this case, we're doing a do post, if you recall. And it will go and call this function here. It gets those parameters that we sent in the post. And then it calls and runs this function that says, from Google Sheet, get data and build the OpenAI batch request in the required JSON structure. Then we can create the batch file and store that to Google Drive. Then we need to upload that batch file to the servers at OpenAI. Then we need to create a batch and send that to the OpenAI. And again, here's a batch here, and the files are underneath storage, which is here. So I think we're about ready to do the demo, but let me just finish by saying once the batch is up there, it has the file, we need to monitor it, and that's where these triggers come into play. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. Run. Doesn't take too long. Okay, So it just went to that program. It gave the information it's looking for. It did come back with something. Let's see if I can zoom in here a little bit. It says the batch file was created. The batch itself was created, and both were uploaded to the OpenAI servers. And then, as what's called a scheduled time trigger, it's checking at 5 minutes, then 30 minutes, and if still waiting, then every hour. And then whenever it's completed, the output file will be stored in the drive. And then I'm saying, note, a new sheet tab was created, blah, and it's called this. So let's go ahead to our spreadsheet. And there it is. We click this. Let's zoom in a little bit. And let's make this a little bit more readable. Let's do, yeah, here we are. Truncate that a little bit. Now we'll expand. So this created the following columns. Here's what the drive file looks like. So this is a format that OpenAI servers require, and it's known as JSON-L. And what each record is, this is one record right here. So this represents the first row of our spreadsheet. But notice it has the index here, index 1, that's the row number. And we did skip after 50, and so that's accounted for here as well. Okay. Let's go back here. The response of setting the file is here. The batch ID is this. It was updated at that many hours. I'm in East Coast time, US. And here's the response it gave us back. So after 5 minutes, it will populate at least these two fields. As a little more introduction to this app script editor, there is the time triggers here that it created. And if we go to edit, we'll see that it's going to call the OpenAI servers to say, hey, what's the status, right? It's going to do that at 2100 hours and 39 minutes. Okay, so let's go over to the batches. And it looks like it's still processing 65100. The storage has a file here that was just updated. And if you want to note something, if you go back to batches, it does have a cancel button. So you could cancel it if you didn't want to. And there's a status. So let's see, it's now 9:37. Why don't we change that to 38? Click save. That was the point I wanted to share with you, actually, was to say you could always tweak these. So if we go back to the spreadsheet, my computer says 9:37, so in a minute here, it should run and update this column and this column. If we check the batches again, sometimes I notice you have to refresh, so let's refresh. And it says 71. Go back here. So momentarily, this should update the last time it checked and what the current status is. So let's just wait just for a moment. There it is. So the last time it checked was this time, and it's saying it's not complete, it didn't fail, it didn't expire, it's in progress. So what are the possible returns? If we go back to the script here, I do have right here the potential statuses. Validating, failed, in progress, finalizing, completed, expired, canceling maybe programmatically, or you click the cancel button over there, and if the status is canceled. So we're waiting. We're going from in progress, waiting for completed. So if we come back over to monitor this, maybe refresh this for good measure. It's still processing. So I will pause the video, because one of the things before I pause I want to demonstrate is how quickly, when this completes, where the trigger runs, checks the status, if it is completed, it will put a time in here first. Then I'm planning to click sheet 1 so you can see how fast these are populated. I mean, they're all at the same time instantly, practically instantly. So let me go ahead and pause, and I'll come right back. Okay, the batch has completed. Let's zoom in here a little bit. It took 26 minutes. Here we go. And the trigger is supposed to run and update the remaining fields here. If we go back to the script, click on triggers, look at the one that's currently running, scroll down, 2208, and I got 2202. So instead of waiting that long, let's go to 3, click save, go back here. So when this populates here, I'm going to quickly go to sheet here to watch how fast this populates. So let's give it a moment. Because the trigger is going to run, call the OpenAI servers. What's the status? Status is complete. Update the monitor sheet tab. And then what I haven't told you yet, it calls another app script that processes the Google Sheets API, which I'll go over here in a moment. So just bear with me as it finishes here. Okay, it's completed. Go back over here and watch how quickly. Boom! Look at that. See how quickly that did that? Not one at a time. Boom! So that's fantastic. Now we go back to where we were, zoom in a little bit. So we now see it checked at this time. It said it's completed. The batch completed at this time. The output file that it was existing on the OpenAI servers, we had to go and retrieve it, put it on our Google Drive, and the batch return looks like, oops, let me try that again. Looks like this. And it includes the keywords. So here's the keywords: automated customer support, customer service chatbots, and so forth. So if I close this, go back to the sheet 1, and that's what we see here. Okay. So I did mention that this code, this low code, which is Google Apps Script, it did run another app script, kind of acting like an API. So when it was checking the monitor of the script, let's shrink some of these down. It's a little easier to read. Zoom in here a little bit. Let me do that hack again. I guess it was this one. Delete the element. Get our real estate back. Scroll down. Check batch status. Was it completed? Yes. Then retrieve batch results, which is here. and then it retrieves the results. Read the JSON-L file from Google Drive after it was stored there. And then it's in this funny format of JSON-L. So once we get the file, we got to loop through all that and push data records out. So when it comes to the Google Sheets API, it needs a certain format as well. There's some flexibility, but basically what I want to feed to it is what row I want to update, which column do I want to update within that row or rows, and what is the value? Well, it's the keywords that came from ChatGPT response, right? So then once it builds that into this so-called data array, I'm now saying custom sheet API batch, feeding it the data. So here is the payload it does, similar to what we saw in the HTTP request on make.com. It has some options that it builds, including the payload with all the good stuff in it. And then it does a call to this other program. So if I go to the other program, it looks like this. Let's do a quick hack again so we get more real estate, which I think is this one, right? Yeah. Click that. Click. Delete element. Okay. So here, the do post is executed. It's retrieved in this event. It takes the information and does a batch update sheet where it needs a sheet, spreadsheet ID, the sheet ID, and that data array thing is populated in here, which is a function here. So it takes this function will then take all those, it will take the updates, that data array that was passed into it, and split that up to have a sheet ID, which row, which column, and what are those values. So the Google Sheets API is being invoked here with its batch update. So again, what does that all mean? Practically, it means instead of seeing this row get populated, then this row, then this row, even though it may appear to go quickly, boom, 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 one at a time, what if you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands? The batch just does it. So in summary, if we go back to make.com, we did mention, go to scenarios. Let's shrink this back down just for a moment. We mentioned that to save between 50% to 98% on cost, use the batch processing that ChatGPT has. Furthermore, we said, well, now we need to update our data, in this case, Google Sheets. It also has a batch update process. So two of them together, things go quickly once it's done processing on the OpenAI servers. So if we're going to, number one, say, well, wait a minute, I want to use no code to take advantage of this 50 to 98.5% savings, then it gets kind of complex. And this isn't probably all of it. It could be so frustrating to say, well, forget the 50% or 98% savings. I don't want to hire someone to do it, or it's too hard for me to do. And in this case, we actually, in this case, I did this, came up with a process where we replaced all those steps with just one thing. And the input was, where am I making this request? And what do you need? You don't need much. Well, I hope that video was helpful. So now that YouTube thumbnail kind of makes more sense, batch up those prompts that's on the conveyor belt, goes to ChatGPT batching, in this case, the cloud, and it provides answers into Google Sheets, basically by bulk. So we've got make.com in there as well. We also had some low code that helped to resolve having too many modules and that whole complexity thing. Now, at the end of this video, I did promise to give you the assets. Well, we created a new school community. It is a paid community. It's only $17 at this point. As we add more value, more solutions based on your good feedback in the YouTube comments below, in the school community itself, that'll be great. We are going to offer weekly webinars, Ask Me Anything. Plus, as members, you can chat it up amongst yourselves as well to help out. If you need one-on-one support, that's offered through the community as well. So don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and we'll see you on the next one.